What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in a previous video, I had done a buyer's guide and kind of like a pre-purchase or a post-purchase inspection on this vehicle. And one of the first things that we discovered that we needed was obviously right up top is our valve cover. Now, the valve cover gasket itself might be leaking and might be part of the problem, but I have a lot of oil buildup in this general area around this actual top half of this valve cover. And this upper half of this valve cover is actually our crankcase ventilation valve or PCV valve. So because I have a lot of oil leaking through here and coming from this general area, I'm concerned that either like the plastic welds on this PCV valve part are broken and or just I have a crack somewhere. So I don't want to just replace the valve cover gasket itself. So in this video, we're going to actually be replacing our valve cover and I'm going to walk you guys through how to do that. So let's get to it. All right, so the first things we're going to do to get this valve cover off is we're going to start taking all the stuff off that's attached to it. First thing we're going to work on getting off is going to be our ignition coils. Those are relatively easy. You just pull up on these connectors. These are actually a little messed up on this car. So normally they squeeze in here. When you pick the actual connector housing up, it actually pushes the plug connection out at the same time. And then once you get that out, you can grab these ignition coils and pick them up and set them off to the side. So we're going to get all the ignition coils pulled out of here. Sometimes they get a little bit of stuck in there. Get all four of those ignition coils set off the side. Now this would be a good time if you think that it's needed or at that point in time, replace your ignition coils. Obviously, if you're not having issues with them, it's not really necessary, but it's something you can maybe take into consideration. So the next thing we're going to start doing is getting all of our wiring and stuff off of this. So we have an entire wire track here that holds a bunch of the actual coil wires in place. It has some locking tabs here along the bottom, so you're going to want to try to pry out on this cover here. You have to take the oxygen sensor wire out of the cover and pull it off to the side. And then again, same thing here. You're going to actually just pry out on this cover a little bit and it'll unlock it from those locking tabs. You'll be able to pick it up. These are the locking tabs that I'm talking about, these little holes here. So I'm going to pry that off, get that out of the way. That leaves access to our ignition coil wiring. We're going to pull all these guys out of here to set them off to the side. There is a locking mechanism or a locking not locking mechanism, like a hold down guy here. This one, the zip tie's cut on, but normally it would just pop right off of there. You have an 8mm bolt right here holding that ground for the wiring harness down, so we're going to get that pulled off real quick. That's out of the way. We can pull our wiring harness out and just kind of pull it off to the side. Doesn't really need to get crazy out of the way, just needs to get out of the way. And then we have a wiring harness here for our boost pressure sensor that again is just kind of clipped into these little locking or hold in place tabs on the valve cover. You can either get in here with a pocket screwdriver or something like that and knock them loose or pry them off with a pry tool like I'm using here. Pry them off to the side so they're not interfering. And then if you want to make your life easier, you can unplug this boost pressure sensor to kind of move the wiring up here and out of the way while you're doing things. Next thing we're going to do is we have a positive crankcase ventilation valve hose here. On the end of this valve cover right here, there is like a locking mechanism that you have to pry up on in order to get this hose to come out properly. You can just pull this hose out if you'd like to, but this little locking mechanism here actually holds that hose in place. So we got that out of the way. We can then pull this hose off of here, kind of bend it off to the side, get out of our way. On the end of the valve cover here, we have a camshaft position sensor. We're going to undo the plug connection for that. There's a tab on the end of it. You just pick up on the tab, push the connector towards the driver's side of the car, and you should be able to push that plug connection off. And then the only thing we have left to get off of this before we're taking the valve cover off is going to be this vent line over here as well. These vent lines have these like serrated areas on them where you're supposed to pinch, and when you do that it spreads the top and bottom apart and actually allows you to get that connection off of there. Sometimes just with age they don't tend to work the way they're supposed to. You might have to get like a pocket screwdriver or something like that in there. So again, this guy right here, these little serrated edges here, you're just going to squeeze it like this and it should spread those things apart and allow you to take it off. So we've done everything out of the way. We are now ready to take our valve cover off. Our valve cover coming off is going to be, bring you guys in here real quick and show you, is going to be all of these 10mm screws around the outside edge holding the valve cover down. So we're going to pop those screws off and get our valve cover pulled off real quick. All right, so now that we got all of our bolts pulled out, we're going to pry up on our valve cover lightly with a screwdriver and pop it off. One thing I do want to point out to you guys is be aware that these two screws down here on the far end are longer than the rest of them. Just be aware when you're going to put it back together. It's going to be pretty difficult to put them back in the wrong spot because obviously they stick up really high and they're not going to fit right. And then this front one in the middle here is a special kind of screw as well. It has the stud on it that our wiring harness connected to. So now that we got all of our screws out, we're going to pry up on our valve cover. I believe I have all of my screws out. I do. There we go. Obviously, some of them will come off real easy, other ones might be a little difficult like that. But we got all of our screws out, pull up on it, and we're going to pick our valve cover straight up, and then just to keep stuff from falling out of it, you can flip it back over so that you don't have any oil dripping while you walk away from the car. Now at this point in time, if you were not replacing the valve cover, you would just end up replacing the gasket itself. This is the gaskets are on the perimeter of it. There's also two seals on each set of two spark plug tubes that you have to replace as well. Those come in the gasket set. Pull your gasket out of there, put your new one in. Make sure when you're putting it back together or putting your new valve cover on that you're applying some RTV silicone at the back corners of this block at the end. Gonna be right down in here. I'm going to be putting RTV right here where my finger is at, and then also on that side as well. The reason for that is because there's this piece right here is actually bolted down onto the cylinder head, and because there's a slight gap there where the rubber gasket can't seal, you want to make sure that you put some RTV in there to kind of fill that gap in so you don't have any issues. So we got our old valve cover off. I'm going to get my new valve cover out and get it prepped and show you guys how to prep that, and then we're going to get our new valve cover put back on. All right, so we got our new valve cover here. I just wanted to show you guys the part number for the valve cover is actually going to be this part number right here. That is the OE part number, and then this is the, I'm guessing their part number for El Reno or El Ring, I don't know what the name, how to pronounce this name. This is pretty common part company for German vehicles. Obviously, this is a Mini. Everybody thinks it's British. It's actually BMW product, so this is going to be a good quality part replacement. One thing I do want to point out to you guys is in your box with your new valve cover, you're going to get this little bag that has these two pieces in it. The smaller piece that you see here in between the red guy needs to be put into this valve that's on the back side of the valve cover. So the original valve cover, you can see that this port right here is actually kind of blocked off. That is going to go in this slot right here and block it off. Some vehicles will have a vacuum hose hooked up to here. Just depends on the option packages for the engine and stuff like that. But in our situation, it's blocked off, so we need to make sure that we put our new block off plate in there. If you're just doing a valve cover gasket, obviously you can see how this valve cover gasket lays in this groove here. It'll only go in one way. It's shaped to fit these little squiggles and paths that it's supposed to go through, and then make sure that you're also replacing this guy as well. Like I said, part of the reason why I'm replacing my valve cover on this vehicle is due to the belief that this valve cover, the aftermarket or the factory valve cover, is actually cracked somewhere, which is causing a lot of my oil leaks and stuff like that that you're seeing on the backside of this valve cover. So going with a new valve cover kind of fixes that problem, or alleviates that problem, and I also get a new gasket with it as well, because obviously the gasket was leaking on this one. So we're gonna get this put back together. Make sure you clean up your mating surface around the outside edge, and put your RTV in the corners of those two places where I told you to. So I'm gonna get this put back into place, and we're gonna finish up with this job. right, so we got this valve cover all done on this car. Obviously during that time lapse you saw that you need to make sure that you are following a torque sequence. I put the picture up there on the screen. Make sure that you're following that torque sequence because you run the risk of actually cracking or warping this valve cover as you're putting it back on if you just kind of bolt it down in any random pattern. And then the torque spec for those bolts is 12 Newton meters or 7 foot-pounds. I put that up on the screen as well before. The only other thing I wanted to point out to you guys to not forget to swap over is your camshaft position sensor. It's bolted on the back side of the motor on this side, so 8mm screw holding it down. Just make sure you swap that over from your old valve cover. You guys have any questions about this repair, please comment down below. Be sure to answer any questions you guys have. If this video helped you guys fix your car, please drop a like on this video. I'd also really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys later.
Come, Selector.